a real estate development company that had transformed the city's waterfront. His calloused hands, still bearing traces of his construction worker past, now signed contracts worth millions. 25 years ago, he'd been swinging hammers and pouring concrete to put himself through night school. That's where he met Paulette Tate, a stunning blonde studying interior design. She was everything he wasn't, refined, educated from a family with old money. Her father, Wesley Massey, owned a chain of upscale furniture stores and made no secret of his disdain for the blue-collar nobody his daughter had chosen. But Matt's ambition burned hotter than their disapproval. He worked 18-hour days, saved every penny, and slowly climbed from contractor to developer. Paulette seemed to love his drive then, often bragging to her friends about her self-made man. They married after he landed his first major project, and she gave him 2 children, Lori, now 28, and Derek, 25. The irony wasn't lost on Matt that his son shared a name with the man who would later destroy their family. For years, their marriage appeared perfect from the outside. Paulette decorated their sprawling Bellevue mansion with impeccable taste, hosted charity galas, and played the role of successful businessman's wife flawlessly. But Matt had always sensed something hollow beneath her polished exterior, a coldness that emerged whenever she thought no one was watching. Recently, that coldness had intensified. Paulette spent more time shopping with friends or attending book club meetings that seemed to run late into the evening. She'd started working out with a personal trainer 3 times a week, something she'd never shown interest in before. Her phone was now constantly face down, and she'd developed a habit of taking calls in the other room. Matt wasn't a fool. He'd built his fortune by reading people, by sensing when something was off. The signs were all there, but a part of him, the part that still remembered the young man who thought he wasn't good enough for her, didn't want to see them. That evening, as he sat in his study reviewing contracts, Paulette breezed in wearing a new dress he'd never seen before. "Don't wait up tonight," she said, not bothering to look at him. "Christy Patel is having relationship troubles, and us girls are taking her out to cheer her up." Matt glanced up from his papers. Christy Patel. He knew that name. She worked at some boutique fitness studio downtown, one of those trendy places that charged $200 for a session. He'd never liked her. Something about her struck him as calculating, manipulative. "Which restaurant?" he asked casually. "Oh, that new place in Belltown. I can never remember the name." She was already heading for the door. Kiss, kiss. After she left, Matt sat in the growing darkness of his study, a cold certainty settling in his chest. There was no new restaurant in Belltown. He would know. His company had developed half that neighborhood. For 25 years, he'd given her everything. A lifestyle most people could only dream of: social status, financial security. He'd overlooked her subtle put-downs about his background, her embarrassment when his old construction buddies visited, her way of introducing him to her friends as if he were some amusing pet project she'd civilized. But if she was cheating, if she was making a fool of him while living off his success, that was a betrayal he could never forgive. Matt Allen had learned long ago that trust, once broken, could never be repaired. In business, a handshake meant everything. A man's word was his bond. Those who violated that sacred trust found themselves frozen out, their reputations destroyed, their futures ruined. He applied the same ruthless standard to every relationship in his life. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Colin Watson's number. Colin was an old friend from his construction days who now ran a private investigation firm. If Paulette was cheating, Matt needed to know everything: who, where, when, and for how long. Because once he had that information, he would begin planning her destruction with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to every project. Some men might forgive. Some might try to work things out. Matt Allen was not some men. Chapter 2. The Truth Unveiled. Colin Watson's report arrived 3 weeks later in a thick manila envelope. Matt waited until Paulette left for her yoga class before opening it in his study. What he found inside made his blood run cold. Not from heartbreak, but from rage. The photographs told the story in vivid detail. Paulette entering the downtown apartment building where Derek Reeves lived. Derek Reeves, 35, personal trainer and part-time model, with the kind of sculpted physique that attracted bored housewives seeking excitement. The same Derek Reeves who trained several women from their social circle, including Christy Patel. More photos showed them at restaurants Matt had never heard of, in neighborhoods where he and Paulette never went. Derek's hands on her waist, her fingers intertwined with his, intimate moments captured through telephoto lenses. The timestamps showed this had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of book clubs and girls' nights and yoga classes. Colin's investigation had dug deeper. Derek Reeves wasn't just some random fitness instructor. He was a con artist with a pattern. 3 previous affairs with wealthy married women, each relationship ending when the women started talking about leaving their husbands. Derek would disappear, moving to a new city, finding new prey. But this time was different. The photos showed Paulette giving Derek envelopes, cash, according to Colin's notes. She was funding his lifestyle, paying his rent, buying him clothes and gym equipment. Matt's money, earned through years of 18-hour days and calculated risks, was being handed over to a man who saw his wife as nothing more than an ATM with benefits. The final page of the report contained the most damning evidence: a lease agreement for a condo in Scottsdale, Arizona. Derek had signed it 2 months ago, listing Paulette as a co-signer. They were planning to run away together. Matt set the report aside and poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff he saved for closing major deals. But this wasn't a celebration. This was the end of everything he'd thought his life was. His phone buzzed. A text from Lori. "Dad, are you free this weekend? Derek and I have some news to share." Derek, his son, named after the very man who was now destroying their family. Matt had named him after Derek Jeter, but the irony felt like a knife twist. Lori's Derek was Derek Reeves, her boyfriend of 2 years, the man she was clearly planning to marry if her excited tone was any indication. Matt's mind began working with mechanical precision. Paulette didn't know he knew. She was planning to blindside him, probably waiting until after Lori's wedding to make her move. She'd take half of everything in the divorce, claim she was the wrong party, paint him as the workaholic husband who drove her into another man's arms. The old Matt, the one who'd grown up poor and grateful, might have let her have it, might have walked away quietly to avoid embarrassing their children. But Matt Allen hadn't built an empire by accepting defeat. He'd done it by outthinking, outmaneuvering, and utterly destroying his competition. Paulette wanted to play games? He'd show her how a real player operated. He pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. First, he needed to secure his assets. His lawyer, Paul Cross, was discreet and ruthless, the kind of man who understood that sometimes the law was just the starting point for justice. Second, he needed to document everything. If Paulette thought she could claim half his fortune built before she ever contributed a meaningful thing to his success, she was about to learn otherwise. Third, he needed to understand Derek Reeves. Every man had weaknesses, pressure points that could be exploited. Colin's report was just the beginning. As Matt planned, his phone rang. Paulette's voice was bright and cheerful. "Hi, honey. Running late again tonight. Christy's going through a really rough patch." "Of course," Matt replied, his voice steady. "Take all the time you need." After hanging up, he smiled for the first time in weeks. Not the warm smile he'd once reserved for his wife, but something colder, sharper. The smile of a predator who'd just spotted his prey. Paulette thought she was playing him for a fool. She had no idea she was about to learn the difference between a man who'd inherited his position and one who'd fought for every inch of it. The game was about to begin, and Matt Allen had never lost a game that mattered. Chapter 3. The Foundation Crumbles. 6 months later, Matt had assembled all the pieces of his strategy. The divorce papers were filed quietly, sealed by a judge who owed Matt several favors from city planning hearings. Paulette wouldn't know until the moment was right. His assets were now bulletproof. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and trust funds had made his wealth virtually untouchable. His lawyer Paul Cross had worked miracles, creating a financial fortress that would leave Paulette with exactly what she'd brought to the marriage. Nothing. But the money was just the beginning. Matt had spent those months becoming Derek Reeves' shadow. He knew the man's routines, his weaknesses, his debts. Derek owed money to some very unpleasant people, gambling debts from his previous life in Las Vegas that he'd never fully paid off. Those creditors were now actively looking for him, thanks to an anonymous tip about his current location. More importantly, Matt had discovered Derek's relationship with Christy Patel wasn't just friendship. She was his partner in a long-running scheme, helping him identify and target wealthy women. They'd done this in 3 other cities, always moving on before the heat got too intense. But Christy had made a mistake. She'd fallen for Derek herself, becoming jealous of his relationship with Paulette. The recordings Matt had obtained through Colin's surveillance captured her threatening to expose Derek unless he chose her instead. It was beautiful, really. They were going to destroy each other, and Matt would just provide the final push. The opportunity came during dinner at the country club. Paulette was radiant, practically glowing with what she thought was her secret. Lori and her Derek, the good Derek Coleman, had just announced their engagement. "This calls for a celebration," Matt said, raising his champagne glass. "To new beginnings." Paulette smiled at him, probably thinking about her own new beginning in Arizona. If only she knew. After dinner, as they drove home in Matt's Tesla, Paulette finally made her move. "Matt, we need to talk," she said, her voice taking on that serious tone she used for important announcements. "About what?" "About us. About our marriage." She paused dramatically. "I think we should consider taking some time apart." Matt pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine. In the darkness of the garage, he could barely see her face. "Time apart," he repeated. "You mean a separation?" "Yes. I think we've grown apart. We want different things now." Matt nodded slowly. "You're right. We do want different things." He turned to look at her directly. "You want Derek Reeves. I want my wife to have some integrity." The color drained from Paulette's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." 8 months, Paulette. 8 months of lies. Matt's voice was calm, almost conversational. "The condo in Scottsdale. The cash payments. The whole elaborate fantasy you've built with your boy toy." She started to stammer a denial, but Matt held up his hand. "Don't. We're past the point of lies now." He pulled out his phone and showed her one of Colin's photographs. Her and Derek in an intimate embrace outside his apartment building. "You want a divorce? You'll get one, but you won't get a penny. That's not how community property works, Matt. Half of everything is mine." Matt smiled that cold smile she was finally starting to recognize. "Is it? Because according to my records, you haven't contributed to this marriage's success. You've been a drain on it. A very expensive, unfaithful drain. You can't prove." "I can prove everything." He scrolled through more photos on his phone. "Every lie, every betrayal, every dollar you stole from our account to fund your affair. But here's the real beauty of it, Paulette. I don't have to prove anything in court." She stared at him, confusion replacing defiance. "You see, I know about Derek's gambling debts. I know about his arrangement with Christy Patel. I know about the other women in other cities." Matt put his phone away and opened the car door. "And tomorrow, everyone else will know too." "What are you talking about?" Matt stepped out of the car, then leaned down to look at her one last time. "You wanted to play games, Paulette. You wanted to treat our marriage like some kind of business transaction where you could just walk away with half the profits after doing none of the work." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Now you get to learn what happens when you try to con a real businessman." He walked into the house, leaving her sitting in the dark garage. Behind him, he could hear her fumbling with her phone, probably calling Derek. Let her warn him. It wouldn't matter. The trap was already closing, and there was nowhere left to run. Chapter 4. The Perfect Storm. Derek Reeves was having the worst week of his life, and it was only Wednesday. It started Monday morning when 2 large men in expensive suits showed up at his apartment building, asking the doorman about his whereabouts. The doorman, who Derek had always tipped well, gave him a heads up. They looked like the kind of men who collected debts with interest. Tuesday brought worse news. Christy Patel had called him in hysterics. Someone had sent photos to her ex-husband, photos of her and Derek together, along with detailed financial records showing how much money she'd given him over the past year. Her divorce settlement was now in jeopardy, and she was threatening to drag Derek down with her. Wednesday morning, Derek woke to find his car missing from the gym parking lot. Not stolen, repossessed. The financing company claimed he defaulted on payments, which was impossible since Paulette had been covering those. When he called her, her voice was strained, almost panicked. "We need to meet," she said. "Somewhere private. Matt knows everything." They met at a coffee shop in Fremont, far from their usual haunts. Paulette looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore no makeup. "He has photographs," she whispered across the small table. "Timestamps, bank records, everything. He's going to destroy me in the divorce." Derek felt his stomach clench. What about the plan? What about Scottsdale? What about it? He knows about the condo, too. Paulette's voice cracked. "Derek, I think he's been planning this for months. Maybe longer." Derek's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email." The email contained a single attachment, a video file. Derek opened it with trembling fingers and felt his world collapse. It was security footage from his apartment building, showing him with 3 different women over the past 6 months. Not just Paulette, but Sharon Padilla, whose husband owned a tech startup, and Violet Rowland, wife of a prominent surgeon. The timestamp showed dates when he'd told each woman he was exclusive with them. Jesus Christ, Derek breathed. "What is it?" He showed her the video, watching her face crumble as she realized what it meant. "He's got everything," Derek said. "Every lie, every woman, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Colin Watson Investigations. "Mr. Reeves," Colin's voice was professional, almost friendly. "I think we should talk." "Who is this?" "A friend of Matt Allen's. And potentially yours, if you're smart." Derek's mind raced. "What do you want?" "To offer you a choice. You can wait for this information to become public, and trust me, it will. Or you can get ahead of it." "I don't understand." "Meet me at Pike Place Market, 1 hour. Come alone, and bring your passport." The line went dead. Derek stared at his phone, then at Paulette's expectant face. "I have to go." "Derek, wait." But he was already walking away, his mind spinning with possibilities. Maybe this was his chance to salvage something from the wreckage. Maybe if he cooperated, he could minimize the damage. He had no idea he was walking straight into the final phase of Matt Allen's trap. An hour later, Derek found Colin Watson at a seafood stand overlooking Elliott Bay. Colin was a thick-set man with gray hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Reeves, thank you for coming. What do you want?" Colin handed him a manila envelope. "Your exit strategy." Derek opened it to find a plane ticket to Las Vegas, dated for that evening, along with a cashier's check for $50,000. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Matt Allen is a businessman, not a sadist. He wants you gone, not destroyed. Take the money, get on the plane, and disappear. Start over somewhere else." Derek stared at the ticket. "And if I don't?" Colin's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Then tomorrow morning, every woman you've scammed gets a copy of that video, along with evidence of every dollar you've taken from them. Your gambling creditors get your current address, and the IRS gets detailed records of your unreported income. You can't. We already have." Colin pointed to the envelope. "That's your choice, Mr. Reeves. Take Matt's generous offer and walk away clean, or stay and face the consequences of trying to con a man who's forgotten more about revenge than you'll ever know about anything." Derek looked out at the gray waters of Puget Sound, then back at the ticket in his hands. What about Paulette? What about her? She made her choice when she decided to betray her husband. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Colin turned to walk away, then paused. "One more thing, Mr. Reeves. That ticket expires at midnight. Miss the flight, and the offer expires with it." Derek watched the older man disappear in the crowd, clutching the envelope that represented his only chance at escape. Behind him, his phone buzzed with another text from Paulette, begging him to call her. But Derek Reeves was already planning his route to the airport. Chapter 5. The Wedding Day. Lori Allen Coleman's wedding day dawned gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that couldn't dampen her radiant happiness. The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock at the historic Fairmont Olympic Hotel, with a reception to follow in the Spanish ballroom. Matt stood in his suite, adjusting his platinum cufflinks, a gift from Paulette on their 10th anniversary, back when she still pretended to love him. Today, they felt appropriate, a reminder of what he was leaving behind. The past month had been a masterpiece of calculated destruction. Derek Reeves had taken the money and fled to Las Vegas, but not before Matt had ensured the man's reputation was thoroughly demolished. Every woman Derek had scammed received detailed evidence of his schemes. His gambling creditors found him within days of his arrival in Vegas. The last Colin heard, Derek was working as a night janitor at a casino, all his confidence and swagger reduced to quiet desperation. Paulette, meanwhile, was discovering what it meant to be truly alone. Her father, Wesley Massey, had cut her off after learning about the affair. Apparently, old money families still cared about maintaining appearances. Her society friends had distanced themselves once word spread about her embarrassing situation. Even Christy Patel had turned on her, blaming Paulette for ruining her own divorce settlement. But today wasn't about Paulette or Derek. Today was about Lori, his beautiful daughter who still believed in love and family and all the things Matt had once held sacred. Matt straightened his tie and headed downstairs to meet the wedding party. The hotel lobby was a controlled chaos of flowers, photographers, and excited relatives. Matt spotted his son Derek, the good Derek Coleman, directing traffic with the efficiency of the naval officer he'd once been. Colin Watson stood near the concierge desk, looking like any other wedding guest, but keeping careful watch. "Dad!" Lori appeared at his elbow, resplendent in her grandmother's vintage lace dress. "You look handsome." "Not as beautiful as you," Matt replied, meaning every word. Of all the relationships damaged by Paulette's betrayal, his bond with Lori remained strong. She was the best of both of them, his determination combined with a warmth and integrity that Paulette had lost long ago. "Where's Mom?" Lori asked, scanning the lobby. "Getting ready, I'm sure. You know how she likes to make an entrance." Lori smiled, but Matt caught something uncertain in her eyes. "Dad, is everything okay? Between you and Mom? I mean, you've both seemed different lately." Matt considered his words carefully. Lori would learn the truth soon enough, but not today. Today is about you and Derek. Everything else can wait. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Matt walked Lori down the aisle, her hand warm and steady on his arm. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and the sacred trust between husband and wife. Matt tried not to think about how those same words had once applied to him and Paulette. As they reached the altar, Matt caught sight of his ex-wife in the third row. She looked stunning as always, but there was something brittle about her composure, like fine china with hairline cracks. The reception was everything Lori had dreamed of. The Spanish ballroom glittered with crystal and candlelight. The band played old standards that made the older guests nostalgic, and a younger crowd danced to contemporary hits. Matt gave his father of the bride speech, focusing on Derek Coleman's character and his daughter's happiness, carefully avoiding any mention of marriage being eternal or unbreakable. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Colin Watson appeared at Matt's table. "Sir," he said quietly, "we have a situation." Matt followed Colin to a quiet corner near the bar. Through the tall windows, they could see the hotel's entrance portico, where two figures stood under the bright lights. Wesley Massey and his wife, Paulette's parents, were having what appeared to be an intense conversation with the hotel's doorman. "They're not on the guest list," Colin explained. "Haven't been for 2 weeks, not since the truth came out about Paulette's affair. But they're claiming there's been some mistake." Matt watched his former in-laws gesturing animatedly at the doorman, who was consulting his tablet with professional politeness. Behind them, a taxi waited with its engine running. "They probably came to confront me," Matt said, "or to make some kind of scene about Paulette's treatment. What do you want me to do?" Matt considered. The Masseys had always looked down on him, had always made it clear that they thought their daughter was slumming by marrying a blue-collar nobody. Now, they were discovering what happened when that nobody grew up to be more successful than they'd ever imagined. "Nothing," Matt said finally. "Let them stand there. Let them realize that their name doesn't mean what it used to." As they watched, Paulette herself appeared from a taxi behind her parents. She was clearly agitated, probably called by her mother when they couldn't get inside. The three of them huddled together near the entrance, a family conference in the Seattle rain. Matt felt a presence beside him and turned to see Lori, her face pale with concern. "Dad, what's happening? Why aren't Grandma and Grandpa coming in?" This was the moment Matt had dreaded. The moment when his daughter would have to choose between the illusion of family unity and the reality of what that family had become. Because they're not on the guest list, sweetheart. But why not? They RSVP'd months ago. Matt looked at his daughter's confused face, then back at the three figures standing helplessly in the rain. Paulette was now approaching the doorman herself, probably trying to use her charm to gain entry. Because some people, Matt said quietly, forfeit their right to be part of important moments when they betray the trust of the people who love them. Lori followed his gaze and saw her mother being politely but firmly turned away by the hotel staff. Understanding began to dawn in her eyes. "Dad," she whispered, "what's going on?" "Something that should have happened a long time ago," Matt replied. Through the window, they watched Paulette turn away from the entrance and walk back to her parents, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The three of them stood there for another moment, looking up at the golden light spilling from the ballroom windows, before getting back into their respective taxis and disappearing into the Seattle night. "I said nothing and walked away," Matt murmured, remembering his own words from that confrontation weeks ago. "What?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Come on, let's get back to your party." But as they walked back toward the dancing and laughter, Matt felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. The first phase of his revenge was complete. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. Chapter 6. The Reckoning Begins. The morning after the wedding, Matt's phone rang at 6 a.m. He was already awake, having spent the night reading through legal documents in his study. After 3 decades of early morning construction sites, he never lost the habit of rising before dawn. "Mr. Allen?" The voice was unfamiliar, shaky. "This is Wesley Massey." Matt set down his coffee cup. "Wesley, to what do I owe the unexpected pleasure?" "We need to talk. About Paulette. About everything." "Do we?" "Please, Matt. I know we've had our differences, but she's still my daughter. She's in real trouble." Matt could hear the desperation in the older man's voice. The same Wesley Massey who'd spent 25 years making subtle digs about Matt's background, who'd never missed an opportunity to remind him that he'd married above his station. "What kind of trouble?" "The house is gone. The bank foreclosed this morning. They've frozen all her accounts, claiming she's under investigation for, I don't even understand it all. Tax evasion, fraud, something about moving assets illegally." Matt smiled. Paul Cross had done his work well. When Paulette had attempted to hide community property in preparation for the divorce, she'd unknowingly committed several federal crimes. The IRS investigation was legitimate, triggered by her suspicious financial activities. "That sounds serious," Matt said, injecting just the right amount of concern into his voice. "She has nowhere to go. She called us this morning, crying, begging us to help. But Matt, we can't. The lawyers say we could be implicated if we provide material support while she's under investigation." "I see. She needs help. Legal representation, somewhere to stay, money for basic expenses. We hoped. You hope I might help her?" There was a long pause. "You were married for 25 years. Despite everything that's happened, surely you can't want to see her homeless." Matt stood and walked to his window, looking out at the perfectly manicured grounds of his estate. In the distance, he could see the space where Paulette's rose garden had once bloomed. He'd had it torn out and replaced with a putting green. "Wesley," he said finally, "let me tell you a story. When I was building my first development, I had a partner who tried to steal the project out from under me. He forged documents, bribed city officials, did everything he could to destroy me and take what I'd worked for. Matt, I don't see what. I didn't just beat him in court. I made sure he could never work in construction again. I had his contractor's license revoked, his business partnerships dissolved, his reputation so thoroughly destroyed that he couldn't get a job mixing concrete for minimum wage." Wesley was quiet now. "The lesson," Matt continued, "is that there are consequences for betrayal. Your daughter spent 25 years living off my success while treating me like some kind of charity case she'd graciously lifted up. Then she decided to steal half of everything I'd built and run off with a con artist. She made mistakes. She made choices." Matt's voice hardened. "And now she gets to live with the consequences of those choices. Just like her little boyfriend did when he found himself bankrupt and beaten in a Las Vegas alley." "Jesus Christ, Matt. What have you done? Why should have done years ago? I've stopped being the grateful nobody who was lucky enough to marry a Massey. Matt walked back to his desk, where the divorce papers lay waiting for his signature. Your daughter wanted to find out what happens when you betray a self-made man. Now she knows. She has nothing left. Then she should have thought of that before she threw away everything she did have. Wesley's voice cracked. What are we supposed to tell her? Matt considered the question. In the distance, he could hear the sound of his landscaping crew arriving to work on the grounds. Life moving forward, productive and profitable. Tell her, he said slowly, that if she needs help, she should ask someone on her guest list. He hung up before Wesley could respond. An hour later, as Matt was reviewing construction reports in his study, Colin Watson called. She's been trying to reach you, Colin reported. 12 calls to your cell phone, 6 to your office, 3 to the main house line. She's also sent 14 text messages. Let me guess. Begging for mercy. More like demanding it. Threatening to tell everyone what kind of man you really are, claiming you've orchestrated some kind of conspiracy against her. Matt laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. And what kind of man am I, Colin? The kind who keeps his word. The kind who rewards loyalty and punishes betrayal. The kind who builds things instead of just taking them. Exactly. Matt signed the last of the divorce papers with a flourish. What's the status on the investigation? The IRS is very interested in her financial activities over the past 2 years. Moving money to offshore accounts, claiming false business expenses, failing to report gifts to her boyfriend. They're calling it a complex tax evasion scheme. How long? If she's convicted on all charges? 5 to 7 years plus restitution. But here's the beautiful part. She can't afford a decent lawyer. The public defender's office is overwhelmed, and the private attorneys want 6-figure retainers up front. Matt nodded. In her new living situation? Motel 6 on Aurora Avenue. Paid for with a credit card that's maxed out. She's got maybe 3 days before that runs out. Aurora Avenue. The strip of cheap motels, pawn shops, and fast food restaurants that serve as Seattle's unofficial Skid Row. Matt had driven past it countless times over the years, never imagining that Paulette Tate Massey Allen would ever see it as anything more than an eyesore to be avoided. Keep watching her, Matt said. I want to know when she hits rock bottom. Will do. Oh, and Matt? Derek Coleman called. He and Lori want to take you to dinner tonight. Apparently, Lori has some questions about what happened at the wedding. Matt closed his eyes. The hardest part of this whole ordeal would be explaining to his daughter why her mother was no longer part of their lives. Lori still believed in forgiveness, in second chances, in the fundamental goodness of people. She would learn. Everyone learned. Eventually. Tell them I'll pick them up at 7, Matt said. And Colin? Make sure Paulette knows I'll be at Camless tonight. Let her decide if she wants to make a scene in front of our daughter. Because if Paulette thought this was over, if she thought hitting rock bottom meant she'd reached the end of Matt's revenge, she was about to discover how wrong she could be. The real punishment was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Trap Closes. Paulette stood outside Camless Restaurant in the drizzling Seattle rain, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as her family, her former family, shared dinner and laughter inside. Matt sat at their usual table overlooking Lake Union, the one they'd reserved for special occasions throughout their marriage. Lori glowed with newlywed happiness, gesturing animatedly as she told some story. Derek Coleman listened with the patient smile of a man deeply in love. It was exactly the kind of scene Paulette had once taken for granted. Now, watching from the outside in her day-old clothes and scuffed shoes, it felt like observing life on another planet. Her phone buzzed. Another call from a blocked number, probably another debt collector or process server. She'd stopped answering unknown calls 2 days ago, after the third lawyer informed her that Matt's legal team had frozen every asset she'd ever touched, claimed, or even looked at sideways. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 8 months planning to leave Matt and take half of everything. Instead, she was left with nothing while he sat inside an expensive restaurant, probably discussing business deals worth more than she'd see in a lifetime. A black sedan pulled up to the curb beside her. The rear window rolled down, revealing the weathered face of Colin Watson. Mrs. Allen, he said, though she was technically Mrs. Massey again now that the divorce was final. Get in. I'm not going anywhere with you. You are if you ever want to see your children again." Paulette's hand moved instinctively toward the restaurant's entrance, then stopped. Through the window, she could see Matt saying something that made Lori laugh. Neither of them looked toward the street. Neither seemed to notice or care that she was standing in the rain like some kind of beggar. She got in the car. Colin didn't speak until they were several blocks away from the restaurant. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Motel 6 on Aurora. That's quite a step down from Bellevue, isn't it? What do you want?" "To deliver a message from Mr. Allen." Colin handed her a manila envelope. "And to offer you one final choice." Paulette opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single airline ticket to Phoenix, dated for the following morning, and a cashier's check for $10,000. "What's this?" "Your exit strategy. Same deal we offered your boyfriend, though considerably less generous." Paulette stared at the ticket. "He wants me to leave Seattle. He wants you to disappear. Permanently. Take the money, get on the plane, and start over somewhere else. Somewhere far from here, where you can't embarrass his children or interfere with their lives. And if I don't..." Colin's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Then tomorrow morning, the IRS investigation becomes public. Every newspaper in the city gets a press release about the tax evasion charges. Your photograph, the unflattering one from your arrest, goes viral on social media, along with a detailed account of how you stole money from your husband to fund an affair with a known con artist." Paulette felt her stomach clench. "You can't do that. We could do anything we want. You have no friends left, no family willing to defend you, no resources to fight back. You're a middle-aged woman with no job skills, no income, and a federal investigation hanging over your head." The car turned down a side street, heading back toward the cheap motel that had become Paulette's temporary home. Through the windshield, she could see the neon sign flickering, "Weekly rates available." "The choice is simple," Colin continued. "Take Mr. Allen's generous offer and start fresh somewhere else, or stay here and face the full consequences of your actions. But understand this, if you try to contact your children or cause any kind of trouble for Mr. Allen, the gloves come off completely." "What does that mean?" Colin pulled into the motel parking lot and put the car in park. "It means you'll discover that tax evasion is just the beginning of what we can prove you did. Identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. By the time we're finished, you'll be lucky to see daylight before you're 70. Paulette looked at the ticket in her hands, then at the shabby motel that represented everything her life had become. "What about my children? When will I see them again?" "That depends entirely on them, and on whether you're smart enough to take this deal." Colin reached across her and opened the passenger door. "The ticket expires at midnight tomorrow. Miss that flight, and you'll never get another chance to walk away clean." Paulette climbed out of the car on unsteady legs. "Colin," she called as he prepared to drive away. "Yes. Why is he doing this? I know I hurt him, but this is destroying my entire life." Colin studied her for a long moment. "Mrs. Massey," he said finally, "you spent 25 years treating a good man like he was lucky to have you, like you should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection you bothered to throw his way. You took his success for granted, spent his money like it was owed to you, and then tried to steal half of everything when you decided to trade him in for a younger model." The car's engine rumbled in the evening quiet. "Mr. Allen isn't destroying your life," Colin continued. "He's simply stopping the destruction of his own. The fact that you can't tell the difference says everything anyone needs to know about the kind of person you really are." He drove away, leaving Paulette standing alone in the parking lot of a cheap motel, clutching a plane ticket to nowhere and finally understanding the difference between consequences and revenge. Inside her pocket, her phone buzzed with another blocked call. This time, she answered. "Paulette." The voice was young, female, unfamiliar. "This is Jamie McKay from Channel 7 News. We're doing a story about tax evasion in wealthy Seattle families, and we'd love to get your comment." Paulette hung up and looked at the ticket again. Phoenix, a city where no one knew her name, where she could blend into the anonymous masses of people who'd lost everything and were trying to start over. Tomorrow at midnight, the plane would leave with or without her. The only question was whether she was finally smart enough to get on it. Chapter 8. The Final Gambit. Paulette didn't take the flight. Matt learned this the next evening from Colin, who called with a mixture of admiration and concern in his voice. "She's hired a lawyer," Colin reported. "Marcus Webb, some ambulance chaser who works out of a strip mall in Renton. Apparently, she's convinced him that she has grounds for a wrongful divorce suit." Matt was in his study, reviewing plans for a new waterfront development that would add another $50 million to his net worth. He set the blueprints aside and leaned back in his leather chair. On what grounds? Entrapment, fraud, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. She's claiming you orchestrated everything, from her affair to the tax investigation, as part of some elaborate scheme to steal her rightful share of the marital assets. Matt laughed, a sound that had grown colder over the past months. And what does this Marcus Webb think he can accomplish? He's filed for an emergency injunction to freeze all divorce proceedings pending a full investigation. He's also demanding access to your financial records, claiming there's evidence of hidden assets and illegal manipulation of community property. Interesting strategy. Matt stood and walked to his window, where he could see the lights of downtown Seattle twinkling in the distance. What kind of evidence does he claim to have? That's where it gets problematic. She's apparently recorded some conversations. Phone calls where she discussed the affair, meetings where money was exchanged. Webb thinks he can use these to prove that the whole thing was a setup. Matt felt a flicker of genuine surprise. In all his planning, he'd never considered that Paulette might be smart enough to document her own crimes. How much does she have? We don't know yet, but she's scheduled to give a deposition next week, and Webb is making noise about going to the media if the injunction is denied. For the first time in months, Matt felt a momentary uncertainty. Not fear, he'd faced worse challenges building his empire, but a recognition that Paulette might have one last card to play. "Set up a meeting," he said finally. "Tomorrow night. Somewhere private. With Webb. With Paulette. It's time we had a direct conversation about how this ends." The next evening, Matt sat in the back booth of a dive bar in Georgetown, nursing a beer and waiting. The choice of venue was deliberate, neutral ground, away from the upscale establishments where they might be recognized, but public enough to prevent any accusations of intimidation. Paulette arrived 20 minutes late, looking like a shadow of her former self. Her once perfect hair hung limp and unwashed. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by discount store alternatives, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant stress. She slid into the booth across from him without speaking, clutching a worn purse like a lifeline. "You look terrible," Matt said without preamble. "And you look exactly the same." Her voice was hoarse, probably from smoking, a habit she'd picked up since the divorce. "Still playing the successful businessman while your ex-wife lives in squalor. Still playing the victim while ignoring your own choices." Matt took a sip of his beer. "Colin tells me you think you have some kind of case against me. I know what you did, Matt. All of it. The surveillance, the manipulation, the way you orchestrated everything to make me look like the villain. You didn't need my help for that." Paulette's hand shook as she lit a cigarette. "I recorded conversations. Phone calls with Derek, meetings with lawyers, even some of our own arguments. Everything that proves you set this up from the beginning." "Assuming that's true," Matt said calmly, "what exactly do you think you can prove? That you manipulated me into the affair. That you knew about Derek's background and chose not to warn me. That you deliberately allowed me to commit crimes so you could use them against me later." Matt nodded thoughtfully. "It's an interesting theory. Creative, even. But it has one fatal flaw, which is, it assumes I forced you to betray our marriage." Matt leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Tell me, Paulette, in any of these recordings, is there evidence of me forcing you to sleep with Derek Reeves? Any proof that I made you steal money from our accounts to fund his lifestyle? Any indication that I compelled you to sign lease agreements for secret apartments in Arizona?" Paulette's cigarette trembled between her fingers. "Because here's what I think happened," Matt continued. "I think you got bored with being married to a man who worked for a living. I think you decided you deserved something more exciting, more romantic, more worthy of your refined sensibilities. And I think you convinced yourself that since you'd marry beneath your station, You were entitled to whatever you could take when you left. That's not. The only thing I'm guilty of, Matt said, is finally giving you what you wanted. You spent 25 years making it clear that you thought you were too good for me. Now you get to find out what your life looks like without me in it. Paulette stubbed out her cigarette with more force than necessary. The injunction will freeze everything. You won't be able to touch any of the assets until this is resolved. Will it? Matt smiled, the same cold expression that had become his default over the past months. Because I seem to recall that all of my assets are held in trust, controlled by a board of directors that includes some very prominent Seattle businessmen. Men who've known me for decades, who've seen me build something from nothing, who understand the value of loyalty and hard work. Understanding began to dawn in Paulette's eyes. You think Paul Cross is the only lawyer in this city who owes me favors? Matt continued. You think the judges who approve my development permits over the years don't remember who helped build their campaign war chests? You're about to learn the difference between having money and having power. Paulette's face had gone pale. You can't just. I can do whatever I want, Matt interrupted, because I earned it. Every connection, every favor, every alliance, I built them through 30 years of keeping my word and delivering on my promises. You built nothing except a reputation for looking pretty at charity galas. He stood to leave, dropping a 20 on the table for his beer. The offer still stands, he said. $10,000 and a one-way ticket out of Seattle. After tomorrow, that offer expires permanently. And if I stay? If I fight this? Matt looked down at her, this woman who'd once seemed so far above his station, now reduced to making threats from the booth of a dive bar. Then you'll discover that I'm not just ruthless when it comes to business, he said. I'm thorough and patient, and I never, ever forget. He walked away, leaving Paulette sitting alone with her cigarettes and her fading hopes of revenge. Behind him, he heard her phone ring. Probably Marcus Webb, calling to discuss strategy for a case that would never see the inside of a courtroom. By tomorrow, even that small comfort would be gone. Chapter 9. The Guest List. The final blow came not through lawyers or investigators, but through Lori. Matt's daughter called him 3 days later, her voice heavy with a sadness that cut through his carefully constructed emotional armor. Dad, we need to talk. About Mom. They met at the house. Matt's house now, legally and completely, in the same study where he'd first learned about Paulette's betrayal. Lori sat in the chair where her mother had once pretended to read while actually planning her escape, and the irony wasn't lost on either of them. She came to see me yesterday, Lori said without preamble. At my office. She looked broken, Dad. Really broken. Matt poured himself a bourbon and offered one to Lori, who shook her head. What did she want? She begged me to talk to you, to ask you to stop whatever you're doing to her. Lori's voice cracked slightly. She said she's been living in her car for the past week because she can't afford even the cheapest motel. And what did you tell her? I told her I'd talk to you, that maybe we could work something out, some kind of arrangement where she could have a little money, a small apartment, something basic to live on. Matt studied his daughter's face. Even now, even knowing what Paulette had done, Lori still believed in forgiveness, in second chances, in the fundamental possibility of redemption. And what do you think I should do? Lori was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I think you should help her. Not because she deserves it, but because you're better than this. Because the man who raised me wouldn't destroy someone completely, no matter what they'd done. Matt felt something twist in his chest. Not guilt, exactly, but a recognition of what his revenge had cost him beyond money or time. His daughter was looking at him like she didn't recognize the man he'd become. She betrayed everything we built together, he said quietly. 25 years of marriage, our family, the trust between us. She threw it all away for a con artist who saw her as nothing more than a mark. I know that, Dad, but she's still my mother, and she's still the woman you loved once, before everything went wrong. Matt walked to the window, looking out at the space where Paulette's rose garden had once bloomed. In the distance, he could see construction crews working on his latest development, another addition to the empire he'd built through sheer force of will and refusal to accept defeat. Do you know what she said to me the day I filed for divorce? He asked. Lori shook her head. She said I should be grateful. that she'd wasted the best years of her life married to a man who could never give her the life she deserved. She actually used the word wasted. The room fell silent, except for the distant sound of construction equipment. That night, I made myself a promise, Matt continued. I promised that Paulette would learn exactly what her life was worth without the man she'd wasted it on. I promised that everyone who'd ever treated me like I should be grateful for their scraps would understand who they'd really been dealing with. And now, have you proved whatever you needed to prove? Matt turned back to his daughter, seeing his own eyes staring back at him from her face. What would you have me do? Let her go. Really let her go. Give her enough money to start over somewhere else, and then move on with your life. Like Derek Reeves? Just let her walk away clean after destroying everything we built. Like a man who's strong enough to win without having to destroy his opponent completely. Matt drained his bourbon and set the glass down with a soft clink. In the silence that followed, he could hear his phone buzzing. Probably another call from Paul Cross or Colin Watson, updating him on some new aspect of Paulette's legal troubles. He didn't answer it. She came to the wedding, he said finally. Did you know that? Stood outside in the rain like some kind of beggar, trying to get into her own daughter's wedding reception. I know. I saw her. And you know what I told her parents when they called, begging me to help her? Lori nodded. Ask someone on your guest list. That's right. Matt walked to his desk and pulled out a checkbook, an old-fashioned paper one he kept for personal expenses. And do you know what I realized yesterday when I was going through the final divorce papers? What? The guest list was my choice. Every name on it, every person who got to be part of that celebration. I chose who belonged and who didn't. He wrote out a check and tore it from the book. But I also get to choose who belongs on the guest list for the rest of my life. He handed the check to Lori, who looked at it and gasped. It was made out to Paulette for $50,000, enough for a fresh start, a small apartment, basic transportation. What's the catch? Lori asked. No catch. She takes the money and leaves Seattle. Permanently. No contact with you or Derek. No attempts to interfere in our lives. No more legal challenges or media interviews. She disappears completely, and we never speak of her again. And if she doesn't agree? Matt's expression hardened back into the cold mask it had become over the past months. Then she'll learn that this was her last chance to walk away with anything at all. Lori stared at the check, then at her father. Why are you doing this? Really? Because you asked me to. Because you're my daughter, and you still believe your old man is capable of mercy. Matt sat down across from her. And because I want you to remember me as the man who was strong enough to end this on his own terms, not as someone who was consumed by his own revenge. What about forgiveness? I'll never forgive her, Lori. I'll never forgive anyone who betrays me like that. But I can choose to stop caring about her enough to keep punishing her. Lori folded the check carefully and put it in her purse. I'll make sure she gets this. And I'll make sure she understands the terms. Good. As Lori prepared to leave, she paused at the study door. Dad, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. And if she comes back, if she tries to contact you or cause trouble, then she'll learn that the guest list is permanent, Matt replied. And there are no second chances for people who abuse my generosity. After Lori left, Matt sat alone in his study, surrounded by the blueprints and contracts that represented his life's work. Outside, the Seattle skyline glittered with lights from buildings he'd helped construct, from developments that bore his mark on the city's landscape. Tomorrow, Paulette would have her final choice: take the money and disappear, or face the full consequences of challenging a man who'd built an empire from nothing and would protect it at any cost. But tonight, for the first time in months, Matt Allen felt something approaching peace. Not because he'd forgiven his ex-wife's betrayal. He never would. But because he'd finally stopped caring enough to keep hating her. The guest list for his new life was complete, and her name would never be on it again. In the distance, his phone rang with another update from his team. Matt let it go to voicemail. Whatever crisis or opportunity demanded his attention could wait until morning. For now, it was enough to sit in the silence of his victory, complete and final and utterly without mercy. Just the way he'd always intended it to be. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, Consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.